I am going to confess something to you that I have never once said out loud. Not to my husband, not to my pastor, not to my own reflection. For 25 years, every time they passed me over and handed the job I had earned to some man half as good, a small piece of me started to believe them. I would smile and say congratulations and go back to my little gym. And then, late at night, the doubt would come and sit on the edge of my bed and whisper, "Maybe they are right, Dolores. Maybe you are just a teacher who happens to like basketball. Maybe you are not a real coach at all." 25 years of being told you are not the thing you have given your whole life to becoming, and it gets inside you, no matter how strong you are. So I want to tell you about the season that a gym full of little girls nobody on God's earth believed in finally, once and for all, shut that whispering voice up and taught a whole city what a real coach looks like. My name is Dolores Pryor, though for 30 years the children have called me Coach D. I am 51 years old, and I teach history, and I coach girls basketball at Bellwood High School here in Memphis, Tennessee, which is the kind of school the district forgets to fund, the kind of school where the rims are bent and the uniforms are older than the girls wearing them. I have spent my whole life in a gym, and I have come to know, the way you know your own heartbeat, that I am one of the finest basketball minds this city has ever produced. I also happen to be a black woman, and in my city, for most of my life, those two facts were not allowed to sit in the same sentence. I've taught history at Bellwood for almost 30 years, the rise and fall of empires, to children who have been quietly told by everything around them that the world has already written their ending. And then in the afternoons, I have walked into that bent-rim gym and tried to teach them the opposite, that nobody's ending is written, that a body can be counted out and rise anyway, because the whole history of our people is the history of folks who were counted out and rose anyway. I never once separated the two jobs in my mind. The classroom and the gym were always the same work to me. I was teaching the same lesson in both rooms. I was teaching children the world had thrown away that they were not, in fact, throwaway. And there is not a subject on this earth more important than that one. Before I go on, let me say something to one particular person listening tonight. If you have ever been passed over again and again for the very thing you were the best in the room at, watched it handed to someone less able because they looked more like what the world expected, tell me about it in the comments. Tell me what they said you were not, because I have a feeling this room is about to fill up with people who were overlooked for years by folks who could not see what was right in front of them. And I want every single one of you sitting here with me tonight. Now let me take you back so you understand where the fire comes from. I was a ball player, a real one, back in my day, before the world decided girls' basketball was worth watching. I was the best guard anybody around here had ever seen. I could see the whole floor 2 seconds before it happened. I could feel a defense the way you feel a change in the weather. But I came up at a time and in a place where a poor black girl with a jump shot had nowhere to take it. There were no scholarships waving at girls like me, no cameras, no path. My family needed me to work, and so the dream that lived in my hands got folded up and put away in a drawer, the way so many of our gifts got folded up and put away, because the world had no room on its shelf for them yet. I want you to understand what it costs to be that good at a thing and have nowhere to take it. I would lie awake as a girl and run whole games in my head. The games I would never get to play. The scholarship that was never coming. The gym lights that were never going to come on for a poor black girl with no daddy and a mama working 2 jobs. There was a college coach who came through once, scouting a boy, and he watched me play in a pickup game on the outdoor court, and he stood there a long while. And then he walked over and he said, "Young lady, if you were a boy, I would be sitting at your kitchen table tonight." And then he got in his car and drove off to go sign the boy. If you were a boy. I was 14 years old, and I learned, standing on that cracked blacktop, that being the best was not going to be enough, that there was a whole separate test I would have to pass my entire life that had nothing to do with how good I was, and that I might never pass it. Because it was not a test about me at all. It was a test about other people's eyes. I do not tell you that for pity. I tell you so you understand what I saw. Years later, when I looked at a bench full of girls just like I had been, I did not see a basketball team. I saw a drawer full of folded-up dreams. And I made up my mind that not a single one of them was going to get put away unopened the way mine had been. There was one person, when I was a girl, who saw me. An old coach named Inez Farrell, who ran the rec league in a church basement, the only place a girl could play back then. Coach Inez was the first grown person who ever looked at me and saw something worth building instead of something to be managed. She is the one who taught me that you do not coach basketball, you coach people, that the game is just the thing you use to reach the child. When she passed, her family gave me her whistle, an old brass whistle worn smooth as a river stone from 30 years against her lips, and I have worn that whistle around my neck every single day I have ever coached. When my own faith in myself runs low, I close my hand around it, and I remember that somebody once believed in a folded-up girl, and it changed the whole direction of her life. That whistle is the realest thing I own. Coach Inez did not have much. That church basement flooded every spring, and the backboards were plywood her husband had painted. And some years, she bought our shoes out of her own thin pocket. But she gave us the only thing that has ever truly changed a child, which is the experience of a grown woman looking at you like you are worth her whole attention. She used to grab my chin after a game, look me dead in the eye, and say, "Dolores, God does not make junk, and he surely did not start with you." I heard that 1,000 times before I was 16, and on the nights the world tried hardest to convince me I was nothing, that one sentence in Coach Inez's voice is what stood between me and believing it. When she passed, I sat in the back of her funeral, and I made her a promise. I told her I would spend my life being, for some other folded-up child, exactly what she had been for me. The whistle is how I keep that promise. Somewhere I can feel it every single day, right against my heart. So let me tell you what kind of coach I actually am, because this matters. I am not a yeller. I am not a clipboard-throwing, vein-popping, put-on-a-show coach. And for a long time, that was held against me, because people think coaching is theater. It is not theater. I am a teacher of the game, down to the smallest detail. I can break a defense down to its bones and show a 16-year-old exactly where the crack is. I run sets that other coaches steal and cannot make work because they took the play, but not the teaching underneath it. My girls are always the most fundamentally sound team on the floor, the most disciplined, the most together. Because I do not recruit talent I cannot buy anyway. I build it. I take whoever walks through my door and I make them better than they had any right to become. That is the hardest thing to do in all of coaching, and it is the thing nobody gives you credit for because it does not look flashy. It just looks like winning you were somehow supposed to do all along. Let me give you one small example of the thing nobody wanted to call coaching. There is a moment in a close game, late, when everybody is tired and scared, and a team will forget everything it knows and just start heaving up bad shots and praying. I have a rule for those moments, a thing I drill from the first day of practice until it lives in my players somewhere underneath thinking. And the rule is that when it gets hard, we get simple. We do not get fancy, we get fundamental. We go back to the 3 or 4 things we do better than anybody alive, and we do them slowly and perfectly while the other team comes apart. It sounds like nothing. It is the hardest thing in all of sports, to make scared teenagers stay calm and disciplined while the whole gym is screaming. and you cannot install it in a timeout. You install it in October, in an empty gym, 1,000 boring times, so that in March, it is simply who they are. That is coaching. The grown men who took my plays never understood that the play was never the point. The teaching underneath the play was the point. You can photocopy a play in an afternoon. You cannot photocopy 4 months of somebody believing in a child until the child finally believes it back. And for 25 years, the men who handed out the real jobs looked at all of that and called it something small. Every time a head coaching job opened up at one of the good schools, the ones with the money and the new gyms and the booster clubs, I applied. And every time, they hired a man. Sometimes a man I had taught. Sometimes a man whose entire offense I had diagrammed for him over coffee when he was a young assistant who did not know a zone from a man to man. I watched men I had personally made better get the jobs, the titles, the salaries, the respect, while I went back to Bellwood and my bent rims. There was one year that still sits in me. A head job came open at the best girls program in the city, a gym I knew, a gym I had beaten, and I put together an application that was frankly a thing of beauty. Years of player development, a winning record built out of nothing, references from every honest person in the game. And they hired a man named Doug, who had been a decent boys' assistant and had never coached a single girl in his life. And 3 weeks later, I am not making this up, Doug called me. He called me, the woman they had hired him over, and he asked, could we maybe get together so I could help him understand the girls' game? And you want to know the thing about women like me? I went. I sat with Doug for 2 hours and I taught him because I was not going to let those girls suffer for the foolishness of the men who hired him. And then I drove home from that meeting and I sat in my own driveway and I cried because I had just done, for free, the exact job they would not pay me to do and would not even let me have. And when I would ask why, the answer was always, dressed up nice, but it was always the same answer underneath. They would say I was wonderful with the girls. They would say I was such an asset as a teacher. They would say the program needed a certain kind of leader, a commanding presence, somebody the boosters and the parents would rally behind. And what every bit of that meant, when you boiled it down, was a man. They could not picture a woman as the face of a program. They could not picture me being respected by a room full of men. So they decided I should not be in the room. The man who said it plainest was our athletic director, a man named Hollis Tisdale. And I want to be fair to Hollis, because he was not a cruel man. And that is the thing people get wrong about how this works. Hollis liked me. He respected me, in his way. He just could not see me. He had a picture in his head, built over 50 years, of what a head coach was. And that picture had a deep voice and broad shoulders. And no matter how many games my girls won, I could not fit myself into that picture. Because the problem was never my record. The problem was his imagination. Once, after he passed me over yet again for a young man with half my wins, I asked him straight out, Hollis, what is it I cannot do? And he looked uncomfortable, and he said, Dee, it is not what you can do. It is what folks expect to see. And he meant it kindly. That is the part that nearly broke me. He meant it kindly. Because cruelty, you can fight. If Hollis had hated me, if he had said something ugly, I could have taken that ugliness and built a fire with it. But Hollis did not hate me. He would have told you, sincerely, that he admired me, that I was one of the finest people in his whole athletic department, and he would have believed every word of it. He just could not make the leap from admiring me to handing me the keys, because somewhere deep underneath all his decency lived a picture, planted there by every coach he had ever watched, of what authority is shaped like. And that picture was a man. He was not a villain. He was a good man with a blind spot the exact size and shape of my entire career. And I have come to believe that those blind spots, living inside genuinely good people, do more quiet damage to women like me than all the obvious villains in the world put together. Because you cannot even name it out loud without being the one who gets called unreasonable. So that is the wound I carried into the season I want to tell you about. 25 years of being the best and being told it did not count. And I will be honest with you, that season started with me at the lowest I had ever been, because that summer they had passed me over one final time for the district's flagship varsity job and given it to a slick young man named Brett Causey, who had a podcast and a Twitter following and a quarter of my understanding of the game. And something in me just folded up, like that old dream in the drawer. I sat in my car in the Bellwood parking lot and I thought, I am done. I will teach my history and I will let the basketball go. 25 years, and they have told me my whole life's work does not count. And maybe it is time I believed them. I want to tell you how dark that parking lot felt, because somebody listening is sitting in a parking lot of their own tonight. I am not a quitter. I have never quit a thing in my life. But there is a particular exhaustion that comes from being told, gently, for a quarter of a century, by people who smile while they say it, that the thing you are best at is not really meant for you. It is heavier than cruelty. Cruelty you can get angry at, and anger gives you fuel. But kindness that overlooks you leaves you nothing at all to push against. It just slowly empties you out. And I was empty, sitting in that car. I had my hand on the keys, all set to drive home and call Hollis on Monday and tell him I was hanging up my whistle for good. I truly meant to do it. And then I walked into my gym, where my girls were waiting for our first practice. And I could not do it. Because look at who was sitting on that floor. There was Tamia, 6 feet tall and angry at the whole world, who had been kicked off 2 other teams for fighting, whom every other coach had given up on. There was little Deja, barely 5 feet, who was raising her younger brothers because her mama was sick, who came to practice exhausted and played like the gym was the only place on earth she got to be a child. There was a girl we called Peaches, who had not spoken above a whisper since something happened at home that she would not talk about. These were my girls, the throwaways, the ones the district did not fund and the world did not count. And I looked at them, and I heard Coach Inez in my head. You do not coach basketball, you coach people. And I understood that if I quit on myself, I was quitting on every folded up dream sitting on that floor. And I could not do it. So I closed my hand around that worn brass whistle, and I blew it. And I said, ladies, line up. We have got work to do. I am not going to tell you it was magic. It was not magic. It was October to March of the hardest, most patient teaching I have ever done in my life. I taught Tamia that all that anger was just power with nowhere to go, and I gave it somewhere to go, on the defensive end, where I turned her into a force that swallowed the other team's best player whole. I taught Deja that the same eyes that watched over her brothers could read a passing lane, and I made her my point guard, my coach on the floor. I got Peaches to talk again by giving her a job that required her to call out the screens, until one day, this child who had not raised her voice in a year was directing traffic at the top of a press like a general. You have to understand, none of that came easy, and none of it came fast. Tamia tested me for 2 solid months, dared me to give up on her the way everybody always had. Missed practices, mouthed off, tried to get herself thrown away one more time, because being thrown away was the only thing she had ever learned to trust. And I just kept showing up. I kept putting her name on the board. I kept telling her, you are not going anywhere. I have seen worse than you, and loved them too. Until one day, somewhere around December, she stopped fighting me, and she started fighting for me. And a 6-foot girl with all that fire finally pointed in the right direction is a beautiful and a terrifying thing to behold. Deja, I had to convince that she was even allowed to want something for herself. This child so used to pouring herself out for everybody else that she did not know she was permitted to receive. The first time I told her she was the smartest player on the floor, she looked at me like I had spoken to her in a foreign language. Building a team like mine is not X's and O's. It is rebuilding what the world has broken in a child, one practice at a time. And then, almost as an afterthought, teaching them to play a little basketball. I taught them my sets, the real ones, the ones grown men could not run. And because they trusted me, because they knew I saw them, they ran them perfectly. We did not have the talent of the rich schools. We had something their money could not buy. We had a team that would run through a wall for a coach who had looked at the most thrown-away girls in the city and told them, "I see exactly who you are, and who you are is enough." And we started to win. Lord, did we start to win. We won games we had no business winning against schools with budgets 10 times ours. And people started to notice the little team from Bellwood with the bent rims and the lady coach. We won our district, which Bellwood had not done in a generation. We won our region, and every round we advanced. I watched the same thing happen on the other bench, the famous coaches, the men, looking down their noses at us during warm-ups and then looking very confused by the second quarter, because they had prepared for a team, and they had not prepared for a teacher. They had their athletes. I had a machine I had built by hand, and a hand-built machine, tuned right, will beat raw talent that was never taught how to work. We made it all the way to the state championship game, the little throwaway girls from the school nobody funded. And do you want to guess who was waiting for us there? It was Brookfield Academy, the richest program in the state, coached by Brett Causey, the slick young man they had chosen over me that very summer. The whole city felt it. The newspaper wrote it up as the story it was, the underfunded school against the powerhouse. But underneath that, everybody in our world knew the realer story, the lady coach they had passed over against the man they had passed her over for, on the biggest stage there was, with a scoreboard that does not care about anybody's imagination. Hollis Tisdale was in the stands. Every man who had ever told me I was not the face of a program was in those stands. And I stood in that arena before the game with my hand wrapped around Coach Inez's whistle. And for the first time in 25 years, I was not nervous, because I knew something they did not know. I knew that I was the best coach in that building. I had always been the best coach in the building. The only thing that had ever been in question was whether the world would finally have to admit it. And tonight there would be no committee, no imagination, no kindly worded excuse. Tonight, there was just the game. And the game does not lie. Before the tip, we did what we had done before every game that whole season. We gathered in a tight knot down at the end of the bench, foreheads almost touching, and I did not pray for us to win. I never have, not once in 30 years. I prayed the only prayer that has ever made any sense to me, the one Coach Inez taught me on a flooded church basement floor a lifetime ago. I prayed, "Lord, let these girls play like they know they are loved." That is all I have ever asked him for, because a child who plays like she knows she is loved will outrun a child playing scared every single time. And there were 40 minutes left between my girls and the whole world finally seeing what I had seen in them all along. I lifted my head and I caught Deja's eye, and that child nodded at me, calm as still water, and I knew we were ready. I am not going to give you a play-by-play because the details are not the point. The point is that we were the better coached team, and over 40 minutes against more talent than we had any right to beat. That is the thing that won. There was a stretch in the third quarter when Brookfield went on a run, the way rich, talented teams do, and the whole arena felt like it was about to tip their way. And I called a timeout, and I looked at my girls, and they were scared. And I did not give them a speech. I just reminded them who they were. I said, when it gets hard, we get simple. That was all. We get simple. And I watched it travel around that huddle, and I watched their breathing slow back down. And they walked out onto that floor and did the boring, fundamental, beautiful things we had done 10,000 times in an empty gym. And the run died, because a scared team that knows exactly what to do will always, eventually, outlast a confident team that is just freelancing on talent. Brett Causey was up off his bench the whole fourth quarter, screaming, throwing his hands, putting on the show that everybody mistakes for coaching. And I just sat on my stool, calm as Sunday morning. Because all of my coaching had been done back in October, there was nothing left for me to do in March but trust it. When Brookfield went to their star in the fourth quarter, my Tamia was waiting, because I had spent 4 months teaching her exactly that moment. When the game got tight and tired legs make people forget what to do, my girls did not forget, because I had drilled it into their bones. While Causey's more talented team started to come apart, I outcoached that man. I want to say it plain, because women are taught not to. I outcoached him in front of God and the whole state. And with 11 seconds left, little Deja, who came to practice exhausted from raising her brothers, calmly sank 2 free throws to put us up by 1. And we won the state championship. Bellwood, the throwaways, by a single point. And I will tell you what I did. I did not run. I did not gloat. I turned and I found my girls, and we held on to each other at center court, and we cried, all of us, because every one of us knew this was never really about basketball. It was about a gym full of folded up dreams getting opened all at once, in front of a whole state that had been so sure they were nothing. Peaches, the child who had not spoken above a whisper in a year, climbed up on a folding chair in that locker room in front of all the cameras, and she screamed. Just screamed. Pure joy. The loudest sound that baby had made since whatever it was that had silenced her. And the whole team went quiet for a half a second and then completely lost it. Because every one of us knew exactly what we were hearing. We were hearing a child come back to life. They can keep the trophy. I would coach my entire career over again for that one sound. Hollis Tisdale found me afterward, in the hallway outside the locker room. He had tears in his own eyes, and he took my hand, and he said, "Dee, I have been a fool for 25 years." And I let that sit for a moment, because he had, and a thing like that deserves a moment. And then he offered me the flagship job, the big one, the one they had given to Causey, right there in the hallway, after all that time. And I want to tell you what I said, because I am proud of it. I told him no. I told him that the girls who needed a coach the most were not at the flagship school with the new gym and the boosters. They were at Bellwood with the bent rims, where I was. I told him that if he was finally ready to respect what I do, he could prove it by funding my program, my girls, my school, and the schools like it, instead of asking me to abandon the children the world forgets in order to come collect a title from him at last. He did it, too. He found the money he had sworn for years was not there. Funny how that works. Once a woman has a championship trophy in her hands and is no longer asking permission. And I will tell you the sweetest part, the part that had nothing to do with Hollis or his money. It was watching the college coaches come, the same kind of men who had once driven off and left a 14-year-old girl standing on a blacktop court a whole lifetime ago. Except now, they were coming to my gym, to my bent rim gym with letters in their hands for Tamia and for Deja. The scholarships that never came for me came for my girls. The drawer that stayed shut on my dream got flung wide open for theirs. And I stood in the doorway of my own gym, and I watched a college coach sit down at Deja's kitchen table, the exact thing that man had told me he would have done for me if only I had been a boy. And I did not feel one single drop of bitterness. I felt like Coach Inez. I felt like the whole long chain of women who never got theirs, but made good and sure the next girl got hers. That is the only kind of winning that ever lasts. So let me leave you with this. Every one of you who has been overlooked for years for the very thing you are best at, they will pass you over. And they will dress it up in kind words. And the cruelest part is that they may not even mean you any harm. They simply cannot see you because you do not fit the picture in their small imagination of what greatness is allowed to look like. And the great danger is not their blindness. You can survive their blindness. The great danger is that if they overlook you long enough, you will start to do it to yourself. You will start to fold up your own gift and put it in the drawer. Do not you do it. You keep your hand on whatever your whistle is, the memory of the one person who ever truly saw you. And you keep doing your work at the highest level, whether they crown you for it or not. Because one day, the committee does not get a vote. One day, it comes down to the scoreboard, the proof, the thing they cannot argue with. And on that day, all those years of being the best in a room full of people too small to admit it will come down on their heads like the truth it always was. I am Dolores Pryor. They told me for 25 years that I was not a real coach. And a gym full of throwaway girls and a single-point championship answered them louder than I ever could have answered them myself. I am still at Bellwood. The rims are new now. And I still wear an old brass whistle that a woman gave me a long time ago, because somebody once saw a folded-up girl, and I have spent my whole life paying that forward, one thrown-away dream at a time. If the world ever overlooked you for the thing you do best, get down in the comments and tell me what it was. Tell me the gift they could not see. Somebody scrolling tonight is about to fold up their own dream and put it in a drawer because the committee will not crown them. And they need to see a whole arena full of us who kept going until the scoreboard told the truth. And if this one reached you, you already know how to find the next. Go on and keep your hand on your whistle. The committee does not always get the last word. Sometimes the scoreboard does.